Hey, how's it going? I I'm just gonna be doing some UVing, texturing. Thought I'd live stream it. And this sword that I have here, so I'll just be kind of trying to dictate it as I go. Hey Naruto, how's it going? Naruto plays Final Fantasy. Is that what that is? So when I UV, I always start out with I combine my entire object together, and I always like to start out with a planar map. Um, I just feel like it's easier to work with because I have all of my objects as one. So that's what I'm going to do. Just start out with a planar map. And then I like to go into my... by the way, hey Ben, how's it going? I just reinstalled. I kind of just rebuilt my computer and reinstalled everything. So if it looks like I'm struggling a little bit, it's because I'm kind of readjusting to completely default settings. Can you guys hear me okay? I think my mic and everything's working good. Okay, what am I doing here? UVing. We're going to be UVing. UVing a sword. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's not really that I'm rusty. It's just that I just kind of rebuilt my computer. So a lot of it is, as you work over the years, you set settings, and when you do a fresh install, it's like all of your settings are back to the way that you're not used to them being. So when I do UVs, I typically, like I said, combine my objects together, and then I just do a planar map, and then I'll go about separating everything out. I'll try to do this where you can kind of see both screens here. Yeah, I'm usually pretty good about working with default settings because just as a teacher, I have to be good at working with default settings, but over time there's like little things that you change, and you get used to them. Like having that on. You guys aren't you guys aren't watching the Super Bowl. I'm not really a sports guy, so it's not something that I have any interest in whatsoever. Try to do this where you can see what I'm doing. Non-manifold geometry. All right, let's see if we can track down this non-manifold stuff and fix it. The thing about doing UVs that I always tell my students is, like, if you don't know if your mesh is clean, doing UVs will show you if your mesh is clean or not. Because there's certain things you can't do, like unfolding, if you have any non-manifold geometry. And just so to show you here, what I like to do is I like to do cleanup or select matching polygons instead of cleanup matching polygons. Because if you clean up matching polygons, it's going to do things you don't necessarily want it to do. And then when you check for cleanup again, when you check for bad geometry again, it's going to say everything's fine, right? Because it already, in its eyes, it already fixed everything. But the way that it fixes may not necessarily be the way that you want it to be fixed. So I like to do select matching polygons when I'm using my cleanup tool. And I'll do faces with more than 4 sides. That's your n-gons, lamina, and non-manifold geometry. And hit cleanup. And sometimes, right, like right now, it's deselecting everything, meaning that I don't actually have any non-manifold geometry. And this is because I have everything combined, I think. I like to combine everything usually when I do UVs. And sometimes when you have a bunch of different objects combined together, it's going to think that there's non-manifold geometry in here. So I can bet now that if I go here and separate this out again, so if I do mesh separate, and then I go back into my UV editor and I try to unfold these, it's probably going to be fine. Because I didn't actually have any non-manifold geometry. Actually, it's telling me I do, but I don't. Always fix. You don't want to do that. Could ignore. So let's check it again. Yeah, I don't watch, even like I don't watch any sports whatsoever, and I do watch. I like the only time I watch mountain biking stuff, like mountain biking races and like mountain biking events, is if I'm on a mountain bike trip and we're all like in the Airbnb and sitting around and just like watching trail cam videos and stuff like that. That's the only time I watch mountain biking. And my friends are always like, you don't even watch mountain biking? The stuff they're doing is so far beyond what we as casual riders do. It's just like the Red Bull stuff is just absolutely ridiculous. Like that, I have no interest in ever doing anything like that. So watching that stuff on TV doesn't really serve much for me. Yeah, see, it's saying I don't have any non-manifold geometry here. So we could try. So if you're desperate and it's telling you, one thing's telling me I have non-manifold geometry, another thing's telling me I don't have non-manifold geometry, right? And if I do unfold, it's giving me this error. I can go ahead and hit fix and just see what it does. And see, this is telling me that it can't even do that. So I think in this situation, I don't really, honestly, I don't even really need to unfold these. So for now, I'm just going to kind of put these to the side and see if I can get this looking okay without unfolding them. And we can look at the checker pattern here on our model and just kind of see if there's anything weird. And actually it looks fine. I don't really see anything glaring issues with that, so I don't really think I even need to unfold that. The problem's going to be with this guy. I do want to unfold this. right? So if this is giving me issues, that's going to be a problem. Change my color. Yeah, and these days when I'm writing, like I like doing black diamond and double diamond stuff like that. I'm not really into. I used to be into XE, but I'm just not really. It's boring to me now, so I'm just not really into XE anymore. I would rather go on. I would rather ride for 30 minutes on like a black diamond or a, um, I guess you'd say like a blue trail, than spend 5 hours riding on flat like the Epic at Santos. Like I just have no interest in doing the Epic ever again. Maybe one, I don't know. Maybe one day, people change, but as it stands, I would rather ride for 30 minutes and have a lot of fun on that trail than ride for 3 or 4 hours and just be absolutely bored out of my mind. And any kind of road is just like my kryptonite when it comes to riding. Like put me on it doesn't matter if it's gravel or paved. If it's any sort of double track, I am over it immediately. Ben, are you doing the 12 hour? I know you don't live down here in Florida anymore, but I know you still come down and do races, right? Let me turn on. So while I'm doing this, I like to turn on, go to display polygons, border edges. I like to turn on border edges, so this will let me see what I've actually cut and what I haven't cut. So like if we get kind of close in here to this guy, see that this edge is kind of thicker. That means it's been cut. And you can make it thicker. So if you go to display polygons, edge width, we can increase this. Let's see, we may need to have it selected in edge mode. It doesn't seem like it's increasing though, does it? See, this is what I'm talking about in terms of like not needing to get my bearings again. Border edges. Oh, you know what? I think we need to turn on texture border edges. And then try edge width. Yeah, it's still not changing. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, again, it's something that I'll have to figure out later. But at least you can see here, like this white line here, that means that that's been cut already. So like this line has not been cut, but that one is. So turning border edges on can be pretty helpful. I also like using this 3D cut and sew tool, because then you can just click and it will cut for you. Right, and I think, right, so if I'm looking at this guy from this angle, I can see where my cuts are, right? They're these thicker lines. So these lines have all been cut. This one has not been cut. So But I have to be careful because there's two lines here, and I want to cut the outer one. And when you do cut it, and you get it cut all the way through, it should change colors. But the reason it's not changing colors is because I cut it, it's still not two separate shells, so I need to cut it off from the other side here. And sometimes you need to move your object away in order to see what's going on. There you go. So when you do cut it and it turns into a new shell, it'll change a color. So when I'm doing UVs, I find this 3D cut and sew tool very useful. Because rather than like double clicking an edge and going back and cutting and then going back and forth, as you cut something completely off, like this guy right here, if I want to cut it like right in here and right there, as soon as it's cut into a different shell, it will change a different color. So then you can come into your UV editor and we can go into our select shell mode, and now we can move these shells apart. So trying to figure out how I want to cut this. When you're cut, like this is obviously going to be made out of metal, right? Sword. So this is going to be a very sharp angle right here. So I want to try to cut it on these sharp angles. And see, that should be cut off now. But that just means I'm missing one tiny little spot somewhere. Right, it's probably, yeah, I think it's probably this one right here. No? All right. Well, we will just carry on. Oh, I bet I know which one it is. No, that one's cut too. Yeah, so a lot of times I will just kind of cut, like see that one separated out. There we go. And they'll separate out eventually. So this is the one that I'm kind of worried about unfolding, because it said there's non-manifold geometry. So these are the guys that I'm worried about here. I'm going to put this seam right in the middle here because it's going to be hidden under that, and then this one I'll do in the middle as well because it's going to be hidden under that. And fingers crossed, I should be able to unfold these now, unless it wants to tell me there's non-manifold geometry. And again, these two I'm not too worried about. I think these probably don't even really need to be unfolded. But yeah, see, it's telling me there's non-manifold geometry, even though I know that there's not, right? Because when I do a check on it, it tells me mesh cleanup. It deselects it, so it tells me there's not. So where the heck is the non-manifold geometry on this? I don't think it has oh, it does have history. Let's try deleting the history on it. And I want to freeze transforms, but I'm going to try to, I want to freeze transforms in its like default position here, so I can easily just snap it back into place. So even though these are all frozen, I'm going to go ahead and zero this out and freeze them again. And then move it back out. And I seriously doubt that did anything for us, but we're going to try and see if it will unfold now. No, still doesn't unfold. So again, you could try clicking fix, but it's just giving me an error. And it's kind of the frustrating part about modeling is when one system's telling you you have issues and the other system's telling you, no, everything's fine. So it's just something we have to deal with. Now, one thing that you could try, and I think maybe, do I want to try this? Since we have all these cut up, right, and mesh cleanup's telling me I have non-manifold geometry, or no, the UV editor is telling me I have non-manifold geometry. Mesh cleanup's telling me I don't have non-manifold geometry. So see, the UV editor is basically telling me I can't fix any, or I can't unfold any of this stuff, which is not good. So I'm going to try one last thing before I just, yeah, let's try one last thing and just go from there. So what I'm going to try to do is extract these so they're all a bunch of different objects, and maybe then I can unfold them individually as different objects and then just weld them back together. So I'm going to try that. So the method for doing that is going to be just selecting try to do this up here where everyone can see. So I'm going to select it in shell mode, and then with that shell selected, I'm going to go to edit mesh, extract. Right, so now that's its own object. And then I'm just going to do that for the rest of these. Just by hitting G on my keyboard. Right, and then that should extract them all. Now if I go into object mode, I should be able to select these pieces individually. This is still one piece down here, I think. So this is kind of like a last ditch effort when it's telling me I have non-manifold geometry, but I know I do not. I'm just separating everything out into different objects. And see, this doesn't want to separate. So let's just see if with our blade part separated, if All right, so that one's unfolded, or that one is separated. Let's see if we can unfold it. No, still can't unfold it. Let's see if we can unfold one of our blade sections. So see, the blade unfolded. So that's telling me that there's nothing wrong with our blades here. I don't know why it rotated oddly like that, but that's fine. At least we're making progress. So I think the next thing to do is just to manually look at everything. This is going to turn into a troubleshooting segment instead of a UVing live stream. My live streams don't really go well lately in terms of like I plan to do something and it just ends up me running into, you know, one issue out of another. So yeah, it's something. It's just the nature of modeling, I guess. Let's see if I can unfold one of these. Is that unfolds? I think. So this is another issue that will happen. This is a segment on issues that happen while you're doing UVs. Let me just undo that so you can kind of see what's going on. So sometimes if you have a length of UVs and they're all just like a line like this, and you go to unfold them and they disappear, it's another little quirk that Maya has. So basically all you need to do is go into your UV and just move a couple UVs out like this. Right? And now it should unfold properly. There we go. So it's just like a little quirk with Maya that a lot of times your UVs, if they're all lined up perfectly in a straight line, like all right on top of each other in a UV editor, and you click unfold, it will basically condense them down into a single point in space for some reason. It's just an issue with the unfold algorithm, I think. But if you just move one, it will everything will unfold properly. So that unfolds fine. That unfolds fine. This is probably going to have a similar problem, so I'm going to go ahead and grab a UV and just move it like that. And now it should unfold, right? So for some reason it's just okay. So that's unfolding now. All right. I think we're good. We fixed an issue that didn't exist. Except for on this one. For some reason there's an issue with this one. Let's see. I kind of think it's like this little vert right here, or UV right here. So I wonder if we just move it a little bit. Unfold. Fix. Yeah, see, it doesn't want to unfold. So there's something going on with this piece of geometry that's being a pain in my butt. Let's try this. I'm going to go ahead and try to merge all this back together. And we're going to do that by selecting everything, selecting all of our blade parts here in object mode. and we're going to go to Mesh, Combine, and then I'm going to take my vertices, select all of my vertices, and for this I like to get in really close. So if I have any verts that are really close together like this, I want to make sure that they don't merge together whenever I do the merge. So just get like a really good look in here, and then we can go to Edit Mesh, Merge, and we just want to visually look to make sure that nothing has merged together here. It looks okay. And we can double check this by just exiting out of our UV editor and going into smooth mode and just kind of taking a look at everything. It looks fine, even though it's telling me there's non-manifold geometry somewhere. Let's see if we can unfold these now. Yeah, so see, it's still telling me there's issues with this one thing right here. Let's see if will optimize work. Optimize won't work either. Let's see. Right, it's boring, right? Because I'm not doing anything. I'm just. Let's try using our unfold tools. So if you go to tools, you do have a unfold tool, which gives you like a brush that you can brush over. But see, it's not letting us do that either. So here's what we can do. I basically have everything unfolded here except for this half of the blade, right? So this half is all correct. This half is wrong. So what I can do is I can just delete half of my blade here, duplicate it back over, and it should fix everything. I just want to make sure that I'm going to delete the right half here. Right, so it's this. Yeah, so it's this half facing towards the hilt or handle of my sword. So I'm going to jump into my side view here, and I'm just going to, actually we can do that, we can do it really easily for at least our blade and this part. We can just select these two, right, or just select this one first. And just hit delete. And then I'm going to select that blade, hit delete. See, that's concerning how there's like another blade in there. And I think it, there we go. And now it should just be an easy thing to come in here and delete half of this stuff. All right, so let's go into face mode, delete that half, delete that half, get really close in here, delete these guys. Now it should just be a matter of duplicating this, right, and then giving it negative negative Z, 1 negative Z scale. Right, selecting them both, going to Mesh Combine, going to Verts, and Edit Mesh, Merge. Right, so there's a situation where nothing I was doing was working for me. You just kind of have to figure out an alternate solution, right? You can't let one thing not working for you. This is like something that you just learn over time with 3D modeling. You can't let one thing stop you from accomplishing what you need to accomplish. If it doesn't work one way, keep trying it different ways until you get it to work the way that you want it to do, the way that you want it to work. That's really the best sort of advice that I can give you when you 3D modeling something and you keep hitting these roadblocks. If it doesn't work one way, just keep doing it until you get it to work the way you need it to work, right? So now I have both of these, even though it was telling me one of them had non-manifold geometry. Now I have both of them unfolded just fine, right? The last thing that I want to do here is all of these little pieces that I cut into two. I want to weld those back together, which is probably going to be a situation where I need to flip them. Right, the red ones we need to flip over so they're oriented correctly. So I'm going to go to Transform, Flip, and then just flip all these back over. Get in really close with these guys, flip that one back over, and now I'm just going to weld these back together. These are going to stay separate, and I'm going to weld these back together. So a trick for a really cool way you can quickly just select edges and weld two objects together is we can do this in edge mode. And this is just a little trick that I do sometimes, because you know you're going to think that, okay, well, I need to individually select all these edges and weld them together, right? So what you can do is you can go into edge mode, and then I'm going to select all of the edges on these two guys that I want to weld together, and then I can hold down Control and deselect the edges on all the other pieces, all the other shells that I have, right? And now that's going to show me that I only have selected here the edges that are on these two pieces that are welded together. So now if I do a stitch together, only those two pieces are going to weld back together, and then I can go back and do a unfold. Right? Just try doing an optimize unfold. If it doesn't look perfect, that's fine. I'm not super concerned about it. So just to show you that again, because I'm going to do it 3 more times here. If you have two pieces that you want to weld together, but you don't want to have to individually select all the edges, the trick is to go to edge mode, select all of the edges on those two pieces that you want to weld together, and then hold down Control and deselect the edges on everything else. So now we only have the edges here that needed to be welded together. So we can do stitch together, and only those two pieces get welded together. So we'll do that one more time. Edge mode, select all these, and I'm just going to deselect everything else and stitch together. And then one last time on these guys. Stitch together. So it's a really quick trick to stitch together seams if you don't feel like individually selecting those seams. I do want to make sure that these are cut again, so I do want to select these edges here and do a cut. And I'm going to need to do that on these others. Probably not this one, but on this one for sure. UVing is one of these things that is hard to wrap your brain around at first, but once you do, it just kind of, even when you run into roadblocks like I did earlier, you'll find a way around it. And if you're lucky enough to have a model that's clean and you don't run into any of these problems, UVing just becomes sort of like this, for me anyway, it just becomes like this mindless thing that I do. I don't have to think about. I can just turn on some music, chill, do the UVs, and it's probably not really going to take me very long to get through them. So they're very intimidating at first, but once you get the hang of them, you know, I think the important thing with doing UVs is just UV everything. Every single model that you create, UV them. It's like a roadblock to getting the textures, right? It's a hurdle to jump over to get to the texturing, which is to me like the funnest part about creating these models. But once you do, you know, it's just, I got to do UVs. It'll take me an hour, and it's just not that big of a deal, right? Did I not cut these all the way through? I did not. So my biggest advice when it comes to doing UVs is just do them. Just kind of buckle down and do them. And when you get the hang of them, you'll be like, why didn't I just do this sooner, right? This is so easy. It's just hard to wrap your brain around at first because you have to think about like the whole 2D space versus three-dimensional space thing, right? All right, so let's look at this one. Just make sure I don't need to unfold it or cut it up anymore. Okay, so I think I have all of these pieces done. I'm going to move those to the side, and we'll start working on, we can also just snap this back to the center of our grid. Let's turn on grid snapping and just snap that back to the center. So then I can work on these other parts here. I always, when I'm doing UVs, I always like to do the most complicated pieces first, just because I feel like those take the longest, and they're usually the bigger pieces as well. And it's just going to be easier to fit everything in your UV space when you do things that way. So I think the next most complicated piece I'm going to do here is this guy, which isn't going to be that complicated, right? Weak, as long as it doesn't have non-manifold geometry. Both have non-manifold geometry and not have non-manifold geometry. Let's move it out a little bit. And same way, I'm just going to go through with my cut and sew tool, and I'm going to try to cut it on the hard edge that goes all the way around here. Right, and just make sure it's gone all the way around. Okay, so I think that one's good. So I'm also going to cut it here, and then it turns to a different color. So that means we've cut that off. So I think this one's going to be pretty easy. Let's do the other side here. So again, try to cut it on the corners, right? So when you're doing your texture, it's a little bit more hidden. I try to do them on the same all the way around. So that's good. And then of course you want to cut it down the center somewhere where it's going to be kind of hidden. So for this, I think it's going to be right down there. And this bottom one right down here. Okay. Now let's cross our fingers, hope that this is not non-manifold. Right, let's see if this unfolds. Unfolds, great. Unfolds, great. Again, when you have UVs that are like in a perfect line like this, Maya doesn't like that. So if you just go to your UV editor or your UV mode and just move one UV out of the way, let me show you what it will do otherwise. So if I just select it as is and I try to unfold it, it's going to do that. So it's basically going to completely disappear. It's still there, but it's just like a single vert right there, right? This is just an issue with the unfold algorithm that I've found. So all you have to do is just grab one UV and move it away. And now when I do an unfold, it should just unfold correctly, right? So same for this one. I'm just going to grab a UV, move it away. And do an unfold, right? So everything there is unfolded correctly. So now I'm going to grab these, move these down here, and move on to the next piece. Right, we can select this guy and snap it back to its origin. And then I think the next piece that we're going to do is this guy. And I'm probably just going to cut this one. I'm probably just going to cut it right down the center. Right, just cut it right down all the way around like that. And let's see how that looks when we unfold it. I may need to do it more, but let's just see what that looks like when we unfold. Let's take a look at the checker pattern on it. That's not too bad. I think that's good enough for what I need. So we'll move this down here. And then move on to the next piece. So this piece is super easy, right? It's just like a little gem. You just need to unfold it and that's done. Both of these, well, let's see. I kind of want to unfold this one in a straight like grid if I can, just in case, you know, I may want to do like some designs or something on this in Substance Painter. So if I can unfold it in a straight line, that would be great. I don't know if I can do that. And in order to do that, I need to kind of cut off the top and bottom. So let me just make sure I'm moving that in object mode so I can snap it back to its original position. Right, I could, like, I'm going to need to cut it down the center anyway, so I could just go ahead and cut this down the center like that and then just see how it unfolds. But that's actually not too bad. That's not too bad at all. I do kind of want it to be a grid though. One thing that I could try is, let's say, create. No, we don't want create. Unfold. Let's do straighten UVs. That worked all right. Let's see what the checkers look like on it. They're a little funky in like this area right here, but I'm not worried about that because it's going to be hidden, right? So if I take this guy and zero this out, right, that's in a very like inconspicuous area. So I'm not I'm not super concerned with that. I'm kind of okay with it just the way it is. So we can take this guy, put it down here, and move on to this. Is going to be super easy, right? We just need to cut it down the middle. I like to make all my cuts, like when I'm just cutting stuff down the back like this, I like to do that all on one side, right? So like this one, so I actually want to cut, this one's cut on this side. So I want to cut this one on the same side. So that way, whenever I'm rendering it, right, you're never going to see both sides of the sword at the same time. So whenever I'm rendering it, all my seams are on one side, and I don't have like just a random seam right down the middle of my handle. So it's always a good idea to do all of your cuts on the same side. Right, and then this should unfold no problem. We could try, let's do straighten shell. I think we need to be in not want to straighten shell. Well, we can manually straighten it. We can try to straighten UVs, but I'm not sure how that's gonna look. You could try straighten UVs and then try optimize and then unfold and then straighten UVs, optimize. I think that's probably about as good as we're going to get it for that one. So let's look at the checkers, make sure that nothing is warped crazy. That all looks fine. And then for this piece down here, this is our last piece to UV. I think I'm going to cut it, instead of unfolding it like I just did the handle there, like where it unfolds like this, like sort of butterfly it. I think I'm going to cut it along here, and it will unfold like two separate circles. And I'll just have a seam right here, which is going to be like the sharp area for it anyway. Right, so whenever I cut it, so I'm just going to make my seam right here, which is going to be a sharp area for it anyway. What you could do in these situations is you could just model a little bit of extra geometry in there, right? So actually, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to take this. So let's just go out of our UV editor for now. And I'm going to take these two edge rings or face rings, and I'm just going to extrude them in a little bit. Right. And then I'm going to bevel these two just so it doesn't look so sharp like that. So just hit it with like a little bevel. It'll just be like an extra little design feature here. Let's grab this one and move it down a little. But this will give me a spot to put a UV seam, where it's going to be pretty inconspicuous, right? It's going to be in a really dark, sort of patinaed area of the sword anyway. So now when I smooth that, it just has like a nice ring all the way around it. And this is going to give us a really good spot to make a UV seam, right? Because when we're looking at this from far away, right, we're not going to see inside of that corner, so it's not that big of a deal. And yeah, so we can bring our UV editor back up, and then I'm just going to grab my cut and sew tool, and I'm going to use that middle guy right there, just cut that, and then these two pieces here should unfold no problem. All right, unfold, no problem, just like that. All right, so once we have everything unfolded, what I like to do is combine everything back together. So I'm going to take my entire sword here, go into object mode, and combine everything back together. So mesh combine. So we got everything back together here. And then we need to make sure that everything is the correct texel density. So it's like currently if we look at this with our checker pattern on here, you can see that we have like some big checkers here, some little ones here. They're all sort of mismatch in size. So what that means is when we apply an image map to it, it's going to have different parts of the model is going to have different resolutions. So like some pixels are going to be bigger, which means some parts of the model are going to look blurry, some are going to look crisp. We want to make sure that all of these have the same resolution. So that's called your texel density. So there's a really cool feature in Maya for setting the texel density to be the same across all of your UV shells. And that is under transform, tools, and then you have this texel density setting here. So you could put a map size in. I'm probably gonna, this is gonna be like a pretty high res render that I use a sword for. So I'm gonna make it pretty big. So like 4096, like a 4K texture. I don't know that this really matters, to be honest. I just don't know. I don't know what kind of difference this setting makes, to be honest. But it's just one of those things, because I don't know, I just go ahead and put it in, right? And then you do get, and that will give you some random numbers. Again, I don't completely understand what these numbers are here. And then you do set. And that will go through and make all of your UV shells the same size, texel density wise or resolution wise. So now when you apply an image texture to them, they all, every piece has the same sort of resolution texture. Right, so the next thing I'm going to do here is let me make sure that I got this one in here when I did that texel density. So we do want to make sure that everything is the same. All right, so now when we look at the checker pattern here, all of our squares all the way across the model are the same size, which means all of our pixels are going to be the same size. So now we can start sort of filling the space up here with our UVs. We can try do align. We try doing straight and shell. See, that's giving me some issues there. We could try selecting it. Orient shells, that's what we want here. So if you do orient shells, it will just try to straighten everything out nice and neat, which is cool. And then what I like to do is start with my biggest pieces, and I'll start moving them into my 1-to-1 UV space. And I'm going to try to fit them as close to a square as possible. So for example, this goes up to about just under 0.6 in my 1-to-1 UV space. So I want to try to fit everything in between 0.6 here and 0.6 there, and then I can scale everything up together to have it fit in that UV space. Now, with weapons like this, chances are you're not going to get everything to fill that space completely, and that's okay. There are some things that you can do to kind of utilize that space a little bit better, but especially with doing things like swords, it's just not going to fit in that space as well as you want it to, right? I also kind of like to try to orient things the way that they're oriented, right, as we're modeling. So here's the front of that. Right, so this is just sort of like a Tetris moment here where you're just trying to fit everything as tightly as you can in here. And you can already start to see that it's not going to fit into that space. It's not going to utilize all of that space. So we can already kind of see that that's going to be an issue, but there's a few things that we can do. One of the things that we can do is just leave that space empty, and then I can make a variant, a sword variant. So I can just make 2 swords, and then when I get into Substance Painter, which I might go ahead and do that just to show you guys, I can make basically 2 different texture sets for the same sword. So I can really quickly just swap out the texture for a sword by just moving the UVs over. So that's one thing you can do with that empty space, because we're not going to be able to use all of it, unfortunately. So I'm just trying to fit everything in here the best I could. Now, another thing that's worth mentioning here is that this really depends on what you're using it for. Like, for example, this is just a personal project for me. It's not necessarily going into a portfolio where I'm trying to find a job or anything like that. So at the end of the day, I kind of just don't really care about how good the UVs look. Now, if I was working on a video game or something, I would have to, right? Because that's all about optimizing the video game. Or if it was going to go into a portfolio where I'm going to try to show this off and possibly try to get a job with this piece, then you really want to, they're going to want to see your UVs, right? So you really want to kind of take care with your UVs. But if it's just something personal, then I would say don't worry too much about it. Don't kill yourself over it if your UVs aren't just like all perfectly spaced out in there. It just depends on what you're using it for, right? And again, if you're using it, if it's, something that you're hoping to get a job with, then you absolutely need to kind of spend more time and make sure that you have really good looking UVs. Otherwise, who cares? Right, so I'm definitely not using this UV space as optimized as I could. But for my purposes, it's fine. Right, so once I have something like this, let me actually grab this and move it down a little bit. Once I have something like this, I can grab everything and move it to the center of my 1-to-1 UV space here and scale it all the way up until it fits the best I can get it to fit into that UV space. Right, and then if I have a lot of space left over, what I can do is I could just duplicate the sword. I could just take my whole sword, duplicate it over, and then just take the UVs and just move those over, and I'll do a double texture set. So I'll do a different texture set for a different sword. Or you could just leave that space open and eventually, like maybe I do like a dagger or something, like maybe I model a dagger to go with this sword. I can use that empty UV space for the dagger, right? So there's lots of different things you can do to try to fill out your UV space as best as possible. But I think for what I want, I'm just going to leave it like this for now. And this is going to be my UV space, my UVs for my sword. So let me save this and let me go step away for a second. My dog needs water. He's been licking the bowl. I can hear him, so I'll be right back. Okay, so done with UVs. What's next? So I want to clean this up a little bit, delete the history, freeze transform, center pivot, all that good stuff. And then the next thing I want to do, even though I just spent, I just combined it back together to lay out the UVs, I'm going to separate it out back again. And here's why. Because if I separate this out, so if I take my sword here and I go to mesh separate, so all of these are individual objects now. What I can do with this is when I bring it into Substance Painter, I can make these their own unique object IDs, and it's going to make it really easy for me to do textures on it. So I'll show you that, kind of walk you through that process. So just make sure that everything that you want to be on its own ID. So for example, let me get some water here. So for example, say I have this piece and this piece. So say I want both of those to be the same material, same sort of like bronze, whatever material. And maybe this one too. So say I want all three of these pieces here to be the same material. I can combine those together, so then when I'm in Substance Painter and I generate my ID map, those will have the same ID. I'm going to leave them separate just in case. I can still give them both the same material, but just in case, I'm going to leave those together. So everything's separate now, right? We can go ahead and delete the history on it one more time just to clean it up. So then I'm going to select everything, and I'm going to go to File, Export Selection, and I'm going to export this out as a FBX file. I think you can do OBJ too, but I'm just going to do FBX, and I'm just going to throw it on my desktop for now and just call this sword model. Export selection, and then we can open up Substance Painter and bring it into Substance Painter. So we're going to go to New in Substance Painter. For template, I'm just going to do, I don't think there's an Arnold template. I think I had one, but it was one that I made since I rebuilt my computer. It's not here anymore. So we're going to do PBR metallic roughness. I can never remember the difference between these two, but I'm going to do this first one. So just PBR metallic roughness alpha blend. This corresponds with whatever renderer you're using. So for example, I'm using Arnold, and the renderer, the Arnold material, uses metallic and roughness. Some of them use specular and glossy. But it basically just corresponds to whatever renderer you're using. There's one for Blender. There's lots of presets here. But if you don't know which preset to pick, I would just pick PBR metallic roughness, either one of these. And you can look up to see what the difference between those are. I can't remember. Document resolution. This is not the size of your texture. This is going to be the size of your display document. So this is going to be the resolution of your screen. If you have a 4K monitor, you may want to make it higher. For my purposes, 1024 is absolutely fine. My normal map format, I'm going to leave as DirectX. The one thing I want to make sure that I don't have checked is auto unwrap, because then it's going to undo my UVs that I just did. So I want to make sure I turn that off. I'm also going to not import my cameras. And I think everything else I can leave at the default. I just need to bring in my mesh. So I'm going to go to my desktop, bring in my sword. And I'm just going to double check this. But yeah, I don't think you need to mess with anything else. We'll do Adobe Ace here because I think that's what I'm going to use to render with. So for color management, yeah, I'll do Adobe Ace for that. And then probably just leave all of these, or Ace's CG, working color space. This is something I've never done before here, so it's kind of experimental. But I'm going to click Ace's CG because that's the color space I'm going to use in Maya when I render it. And we'll just hit OK. There's our sword. It looks great, ready to be textured. And so the next thing I want to do is generate my maps, right? So I'm going to come over here to my texture set settings, and I'm going to choose my size of the texture, which I want this to be really nice looking. So 4096 is good. Channels, base color, height, roughness, metallic, normal, opacity, emissive. That's all I really need. There's no glass or anything, so I don't need a transmissive channel or anything. So this is all I really need here. And then coming down to mesh maps, I'm going to go bake mesh maps. And output size, I'm going to set this to, generally you want this to be the same as your texture size or larger. So I could make this an 8K map, and that would just help me get a little bit more details. And you know what? I have a new computer. Let's give it a shot. Let's go to 8196 for our output size. We want to check use low poly mesh as high poly mesh. And under general, I think that's it. And then for my ID map here, I'm going to go to ID map, and for color source, I'm going to use mesh ID. So that's going to take each separate model I had, or the reason I separated them out, right? And it's going to give them a different ID. So it's going to be really cool whenever we, instead of like making an ID map in Photoshop or something, or trying to bake it in Maya, as long as you separate the parts of your model out, you can just do this, right? And for color generator, I'm just going to do random, right? And then everything else is good, and we'll just do bake selected textures. Give that a second. There's our ID map. So I think we might have an issue that I'll talk about, and we'll get back to here in a second. So it looks like it's done, but it's got like some weird stuff going on here. So I'm not quite sure what that is. So let's go to, let's return to painting mode. And we got some weird stuff here. So we need to figure out what our issue with this is, and maybe which one of our maps that is that's causing that issue. See, whenever I'm streaming, it's just like one issue after the other. All right, so let's go to, I'm just gonna uncheck these one at a time. So it seems like it could be the ambient occlusion map. Let's try to bake them again and just turn off ambient occlusion. And we can play around with ambient occlusion separately to see if that's the issue. But yeah, let's just try baking them again. Yeah, so see, it's definitely something wrong with our ambient occlusion map. So what we can do, let's try to bake it by itself. So I'm just going to turn all of these off and turn the ambient occlusion on. And we'll try playing with the settings to see if anything happens. It may bake, yeah, seems something weird going on there with that. So let's try, to be honest, I don't know what a lot of these settings do. Let's try turning off relative bounding box. And I'm just going to mess around with it and keep rebaking it until I can try to figure out what that issue is and if I can get it to go away. Hmm. Let's go to common, see if it's something in common. So let's try turning on use low poly mesh as high poly. That's not it. I think worst case scenario, we can probably just move forward without an ambient occlusion map. But I kind of don't want to. If I can, I want to try to get that right. I've never experienced that before, so I have no idea what that issue is. So that did something, but it didn't really solve my issue. Let's see, restore defaults, restore defaults. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. Why are you like this? Yeah, look at the map itself. It just looks crazy. Doesn't really look like an ambient occlusion map. It could be something with our model, with my model. I don't know. Try increasing this a little bit. Again, I'm just kind of taking shots in the dark at this point. All right, that doesn't do anything. That doesn't do anything. Let's turn off relative bounding box. I think I already did that once. All right, I think we're just going to ignore it. We're going to try to carry on without an ambient occlusion map. So I'm just going to kill that guy, turn it off, and let's start texturing. So can now go to layers, and I don't really like using smart materials. They're kind of cool, but I think you get much better results when you try to build up your textures from scratch. So I just like using regular materials. So let's see, is there a leather? Well, there is a leather. Leather grain, leather skin. That's probably the one I want there, leather skin. And I can just toss that on the model. And give that a second. And there's our leather. So here's the beauty about making an ID map. So this is the whole reason I separated out all of my objects before I brought them into Substance Painter, is to make an ID map. So what you can do here is you go up here to create a mask and do add mask with color selection, and then you can pick a color, and I can pick this orange. So now that leather material is only on my handle here, right? So now I can come in here and just edit the parameters of that leather material if I want. So we can change the leather color to something a bit darker. You know what? I think I'm gonna I just got a notification. My GPU's trying really hard right now. So I'm gonna rebake my texture maps to we're gonna rebake them to 4K. And yeah, we still have the issue with our... This is weird. This is a weird thing right here. Let's jump back into Maya for a moment and take a look at our model. See, our model does not have that. Wonder if it's a FBX issue. All right, let's try this. Again, this is more of like this has been more of a troubleshooting live stream as usual. So things don't always go as planned. I'm gonna try exporting this as an OBJ instead of an FBX. So export selection, OBJ export. And let's just try to bring this in as a new asset. See if we get all those same issues. So new, all the same settings here. We're going to do the OBJ this time. Which... Yep, okay. Discard the old one. Let's go up here and make our texture size 4096. Go to Bake Mesh Maps. 4096. And go to ID. We want this to be Mesh ID and random. Okay, let's see what happens. It looks like we still had the same issue with our, yeah, still the same issue with our occlusion map. So something really weird's happening with our occlusion map. Okay, so now let's try this again. Let's go up to our layers and bring in a leather. That much faster that time around. And we're going to mask that. So add mask with color selection. We'll pick that guy right there. Let's get in really close. I may change this. To be honest, I don't really like that look of leather so much. Let's see if there's like a smart material leather. I usually try not to use smart materials, but for something like this, we can try it. Let's try this one. See, that's kind of more along the lines of what I'm looking for. Leather. Yeah, definitely not that one. All right, let's get rid of these others. And we'll mask this. Color selection. Pick our color. There's our leather. We can try. See, we have this AO cavity. It's not really, probably not really doing much because we don't have an AI, an AO map. Which if I really wanted to, I could bake one in, I could just another app. Base noise. It's really not bad just as its default, so I might just leave it like that for now. I do kind of want this sword to look fairly clean. I don't want it to look that weathered. I want it to be like a cool, a well taken care of sword, right? Like, I don't want it to be all dinged and scratch up. Okay, so let's look for steel. Or metal. Brushed metal. Stylized raw metal. What do we have in here? Iron forged. Steel scratched. It's funny because I've said that I don't like using smart materials, but here I am like just looking at all the smart materials like, oh, I'm going to use that one. Silver armor, that one might be good for the blade. Let's just try steel. And we only want it on the blade, so once again we're going to mask that with the color selection. And that's I'm okay with one like some grain going in this direction. I want that to be going up and down. So let's see if we can tweak that. See if edges, roughness details, surface details, base, brushed linear. So let's see if we can rotate that. I don't see any rotate settings. Scale. Fill. Rotate. I think that did what to do. Oh, here we go. Well, rotation. So let's do this 90 degrees. That kind of gave me. I still have or horizontal. I want to figure out how to get those going straight up and down. So that's not. So I'm just going to rotate all of these until I get the one that I'm looking for. Right, so there's still like these horizontal lines. That's what I'm trying to that's what I'm trying to fix here. So I'm just going to rotate them all until that's not it. Let's edges. Let's see, warp, mask editor. So a lot of times what I'll do when I think this is probably something I should have done just to begin with is if you have something that you don't necessarily like, right? Like I have these horizontal lines going through my blade and I would much rather them just be going vertically, is you just one at a time just turn off your layers until you find the one that's kind of problematic. right? Eventually you'll find it. So it's this base. So something's going on with this base where we have both horizontal and vertical lines. So it's sort of giving me like this grid pattern. So I want to try to figure out how to fix that. So it's not this rotation. It's this, right? So it's this like brush intensity, this finished brushed linear. So I need to figure out how to, if I can rotate that. And if I can't, I can just get rid of it. Or I can make a new one, right? Roughness, glossiness, parameters. And it's in the normal. So it's using a filter. See, I kind of like it, but I just want it going in the other direction. So if any of you guys watching, you know more about Substance than I do, and you know how to rotate something without a rotate, right? If I turn that off, it looks it's fine. I wonder if I can. I doubt there's like a rotate generator. Yeah, nope. All right, so I think what I'm going to do for now is just turn that off and then play with the other parameters a little bit. So, and this is the thing about smart materials too, is they're just a lot harder to control. So I think it's better to kind of turn them off and just deal with them one at a time if you can. Usually most of your settings are going to be in your mask editor. Right. I don't want a lot of damage and detail in this sword. That's looks cool, but that's way too. So maybe just yeah, like that. Let's go back. See, I kind of like them where they're little dents like this. And then you just slowly build up your details again. And sometimes you can just drop the whole layer down. I think it's important to that doesn't really do anything, to know how to build these materials. here. But you learn by like building your own materials rather than just using smart materials. You learn quite a bit more just by building your own materials. There we go. And that's, well, I don't even know if I like that. I mean, really, it's about look there. It doesn't need to look amazing. And I kind of want this to be also like this. So we can add the same material to this. If we go to back up here to our mask, our color selection mask, and we can just add in that other color. So I can just go to pick color and pick that one also. And those have that same material on them. Right, and for this piece, I want it to have more of like a bronze or copper. There's bronze. Let's do bronze. I think my stream's kind of struggling to it's kind of struggling to stream and Substance Painter and everything at the same time. All right, add matte color. Okay, let's see what we got in here. And again, I think it's to turn off everything. And this looks pretty little off there. But I think the only thing I really want to change here is maybe the base color. Make it more of like a darker. Something like that. Maybe not quite so dark. I want it to look bronze, just to be that bronze. Like that would be good. And I actually picked the wrong thing here, right? I don't want, that was the wrong color selection that I made. So I'm going to kill that one. And we want it to be this piece. So let's slowly turn these back on. There's dirt. We could try some stuff with it, but I really want there to be like a level of patina and grime, like we get all of our base colors on. I don't really care for that edge damage, and I don't really care for that sharpen. I'm not entirely against that, but I think that's an okay start. And then we need a material for these two pieces here and I'm probably going to use, so let's start naming these. So leather grip, steel, we can just leave that one as steel, and I'm going to name this bronze heart, just because I don't really know what else to name it. And I'll probably start with the same color on these two, with that bronze. See, it's more of like a gold copper than I want it to be. So once again, I'm going to do mask with color selection, but this time I'm going to pick this color and that color, and let's jump down to the base, and I do want this one to be much darker. Something like that does look pretty good. Actually, that looks really good from this far away. And that edge damage, I think I just want to give it a little bit of a blur. Right, so it's not so intense. Let's try adding this to the other one too. So let's turn that off, and let's try adding this one to that piece as well, just to see what it looks like. I'm not sure. Not sure how I feel about it. Let's try this one. Turn this one back on. Add it to that one and that one. And let's turn edge damage, surface detail, see, now I don't mind it so much. But I do want it to be a darker color. I actually don't mind that too much like that. I think it looks okay like that. Let's do something with this guy. Let's look for like crystal or glass. Yeah, I don't want that. I think we can just probably make a material from scratch for this one. So I'm gonna do just a fill, and I don't need a height. I don't need metalness. I don't need normal. I don't need opacity. Don't need emission. I just need color and roughness. So for color, let's make it like a purple. And then I'm taking the roughness all the way down. And then we're going to mask it. And have something like that. Let's play around with the color a little bit. Green looks kind of cool. I think it's a good contrast with that copper look. This one also looks kind of neat. We'll leave it with something like that for now. So once you have it like kind of the way that you want it to be, and I might do a lot more to this. I'm probably gonna call it a night soon. But let's do a little render. I do want to add like a dirt to it. Personally, this default environment. So when I'm doing a render in Substance, the first thing I want to do is go to my environment map and change this to Studio. I like this much better than that. When you're lighting with HDRI stuff, it kind of messes with your colors a little bit because it's lighting with the environment, whereas when you're using these studio lights, it's literally just like lighting with black and white. So you get a much better sense of what your colors actually are on your object, right? So I much prefer, when I'm just doing test renders like this in Substance, I much prefer these studio lights over the HDR lights. And my favorite out of these, I think, is Studio 3. But this one's kind of good too, Studio Black Soft. So the one thing I'm noticing that I don't like is you can see some of the pattern in the textures if we're looking at a different some of the pattern and the textures are going from like this piece to this piece, and that's realistically that's not how they would that's not realistically how it would work out, right? So like you wouldn't generally get a scratch that's going from like here and all the way through. It would like bounce off of this and it would just scratch slightly different. So that may be one thing that I want to change. I'm just trying to get it to where you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. Which now you can't really see it. But I think I mean, it's looking okay. I think the last thing I'm going to do before I call it a night here, I mean, you can actually see it right here, right? See how like this light spot is going into this light spot? So one thing I may want to do here with my bronze armor heart is come in and figure out which layer is causing that. And then coming in, have like this highlight here going all the way through. I don't like that. So we could try to just invert it. And or come up here to the base color and go to the UV space, which is set to UV projection. We could try setting that to something like triplanar. Not seeing that that's making a difference. We'll have to mess around later. See it like how some of these highlights going from here to here. The thing we can do is then we can just duplicate this material, right? So I can just actually that easier solution is to take this whole bronze armor material here and just take all those color selections. And then I can just duplicate the whole material. So I can just hold down Alt and drag it up to duplicate the whole. And with the color selection, I'm going to add it to this piece. And then for the UVs for this other one, we can just change the parameters a little bit. For whichever one of these, for all of them really. So we can just go to rotation and just like start rotating stuff a little bit. So we can just rotate them all a tiny bit. That we want. I'm still not entirely sure it's that. It is that surface detail. Yeah, that's the one there. So we can just edit that one by itself. It just doesn't seem to be doing that much. All right, that's the thing I'll just have to mess around with later. I do think the one last thing I'm going to do here is try to add just a layer of dirt that gets into the corners here. So to do that, the way that I kind of like to do that to begin with anyway, is just to add a new fill layer. So I can just add like a new black fill layer. And this is just going to be like a tarnish, so I don't really need, we probably need metallic. But all I really need is color, rough metallic. And then we can make this like a dark, really dark orange. And we'll give it a little bit of roughness. and some metallic. And then I'm going to add a smart mask on here if it works. It might not work because of our occlusion issue. Because we couldn't get our occlusion map to work. So if I just throw in an occlusion smart mask, that's probably not going to work. We can try it. Let's try it, see what happens. Actually do it as an occlusion map. So if I turn this off and then on, yeah, see, it's not actually doing anything. So whereas if we delete this mask, remove mask, and we do something like a cavity, the cavity might work because we have a cavity mask. Our cavity. So yeah, I am seeing it a little bit in here now. Let's go to mask editor. See, now it's actually working in there. So bring the that's a tad too much. Patina in the corners, which is what right. I like it on sword. I need different type of patina for the sword, but for like the copy, so what I want to do is just add this to those copper parts, and then I'll do like a own for the sword. So your selection here, you can't. You think it would. So one thing that you can do if you want to do a color selection with this is you can just group this layer. So I'm just going to Control G to group that layer, and I'm just going to name this patina. And now I can put a mask on the group. So from here I'll do add mask with color selection, and then I'm just going to pick the my copper pieces. I just had in those copper areas, and then I'll just do this one for this. But in the meantime, I think I'm going to call it a night. That's pretty good. Pretty good looking. I'm still not sure I like the color of that gem down there. I wonder how red would look. Like a really dark red. Yeah, I kind of like that. That's probably something I'll mess around with a lot. Or even black. I think white. I wonder what white Black looks pretty good though. All right, so let's give this a save. I'm just gonna save it to my desktop for now. Called this Heart Sword. And let's do a render. So for sticking with me, those of you guys who have been coming and going. I'll do more live streams like this, and hopefully stumble through it tonight. It seems like it's my with experience. I keep just running into issues, but got pretty far. The UVs laid out and looking like a sword. So you guys have a good night, and I'll see you next time.